Sonic Heroes, Sly 2 Band of Thieves, Ratchet & Clank Up Your Arsenal, and Jak 3 all released in 2004. What a pretty iconic year for platformers, am I right? Well, there's a little Australian platformer that came out that year too. Krome Studios is back with Ty the Tasmanian Tiger 2 Bush Rescue. Ty isn't putting Sonic in the hospital this time. Instead, he's part of a collective known as, you guessed it, Bush Rescue, a team that protects the rural Australian countryside known as Southern Rivers. An interesting idea, Ty 2 diverts away from the collectathon nature of the first installment and instead opts for a non-linear open world game, seemingly taking all the feedback from the previous release as well as adapting to an ever-changing industry. The original Ty game wasn't bad or anything, it was a nice little platformer inspired by the likes of Banjo-Kazooie, and you should totally check out my previous video on it. It featured sprawling levels, a large amount of things for you to collect, and a mission-based gameplay style which is all being expanded upon in the sequel. It was a game that you'd recommend to someone if they played a bunch of other platform games, but never one that you'd initially tell someone to play as their first of the genre. Krome Studios' objective with the sequel was obvious, simply expand on everything that made the first game great and differentiate Ty more from its competition. A simple motivation, but an important one that saw new gameplay styles, characters, areas, weapons and vehicles added into the sequel. There's so much new stuff here that it's hard to believe it bears any relation to the first game. It's almost like a soft reboot in a way, completely shifting away from the squeaky clean image Ty previously had. Now the franchise feels more mature, it has a bit of an edge to it. Instead of collecting thunder eggs, we're traversing Australian bushfires and putting them out. We're going in submarines and searching for people trapped in the sea. We're hopping in mechs and fighting boss cars. I do have a sort of personal history with this game, a history that I brushed over in the previous video. I used to play Ty 2 a lot as a child, but for some reason I never completed it. Maybe it's because it was more open world than previous platformers I'd played, so I got lost and confused, but Ty 2 isn't something I saw the end of until the release of the HD remaster. Last year, my brain started to reminisce about games I played in those wonderful years, and voila, Ty 2 popped into my head. It was sort of like remembering a book you've never finished, that sense of having to go back and finish it to find out what it was truly like. Luckily for me, the remaster had already released by this point, so it was a no-brainer for me to give the series another go. These glorious remasters have given the series new life and brought the games to a new generation. I wish more people spoke about Ty, but hopefully after this video you'll be thinking about playing it for yourself. Bush Rescue opens with an epic cinematic moment, but what's immediately eye-catching is how they've ditched the pre-rendered cutscenes and instead have opted to use real-time cutscenes. I prefer this, it keeps everything looking the same and makes the transition between cutscene and gameplay more seamless. There's also a heavy emphasis on character here as Ty and Shazza make their way towards Maury and the rest of Bush Rescue, revealing themselves to be the cast of the first game. They're more fleshed out here, instead of being NPCs that give you missions to do, now they're directly working alongside Ty to protect Australia and stop Boss Cass for good. Ah yes, Boss Cass. He returns as the villain and he's back with more antics than last time. Joining Ty for this opening sequence is Shazza and Sly. The horrible Frills are back causing chaos, and leading them is the reptile Fluffy, who aims to break Boss Cass out of prison. This opening segment is perfect for capturing your attention and showing all the differences between this and the first game. This is much more centered on action compared to anything in the previous game, with bushfires left and right, gunshots occupying the battlefield, and nature crashing down, obscuring our path. Opals are no longer as scarce as they once were, now every enemy drops them and they've been moved to the currency of this game. There's these mechs that you see the koalas use to put out fires, foreshadowing later missions. We also get to pilot our own mech and beat stuff up. Defeating Frills in one hit has never felt so good. These little bastards are so annoying. We even get to fire freaking bombs at giant mech titans, which are ultimately a distraction as Fluffy makes her way to the prison during our battle. After tracking her down, it's all topped off with a simple boss fight of punching her repeatedly and taking out the oversized steroid-induced Frills she has alongside her. The first game's opening of Ty playing tag in a forest looks rather pathetic alongside a jailbreak, but that's just Krome Studios' way of showing how much they've improved and how grandiose this adventure is going to be when compared with the last. Do you guys remember how barren Rainbow Cliffs was, the hub area in the previous game? They've seemingly fixed that issue tenfold with Tide 2's Burramudgee, a fictional Australian town within Southern Rivers that houses many essential shops you'll be frequenting, as well as the expansive Bush Rescue HQ. It's so nice to go from the empty space in the first game to something that feels lived in, is beaming with personality, and is overall a more enjoyable area to explore. Burramudgee is a great hub world filled with lovable locals and a weird fairy monkey thing that to this day I still don't understand. But hey, Lenny the Lyrebird is here, making up stories for kids. I like how the locals greet Ty when you walk past them. It's a little thing, but it goes a long way at making this area welcoming for newcomers. It's also here where you'll come to grips with the platforming challenges and basic mission structure of the game, as the first task is to clear out alligators in the sewer. Above ground though, climbing houses and collecting opals makes up the bulk of what you'll be doing, as well as becoming familiar with what collection objects there are. Tide 2 changes the way that the collectibles are handled. They're still here, but none of them are essential for completing the core set of missions and finishing the game. Cogs and Bilbies return, but instead of Thunder Eggs this time, there are 30 chromium orbs scattered about the world to track down. The orbs are usually found after a tough set of platforming challenges, so it is recommended to go after them to get more out of the game. There's a side mission involving frills disguised as koalas that are hidden throughout the world and stages, as well as encounters with this guy called Steve, who is seemingly an alcoholic obsessed with goobu berries. You'll want to go after all this stuff to conquer the game. Steve gives you an abundance of opals to spend, and the cogs in this game are used to purchase new outfits for Ty, as well as neat skins for the 4B Jeep. Madame Mopoke is a wise old owl with a small collection of maps for you to buy in exchange for chromium orbs. These maps show where other collectibles are throughout the stages, as long as you have the Infrarang or X-Rang equipped. There's a lot of collectibles with different uses, and I like how Tide 2's collectibles have their own little economy within Burramudgee. It also adds another layer of depth to this otherwise simple premise. Everything I mentioned here was optional, but if you want to go out your way and collect everything, then you're rewarded with an easier experience with some cool costumes to go alongside. Ty's parents own a boomerang shop this time around, a nice little callback to the previous game. They don't have any real character, but the arsenal of weaponry has been expanded upon and made even better. The elemental ranks from the previous game have minuscule use this time around, but there are still a few objectives that require them. Simple stuff like burning a cobweb or using the Blizzarang to cool down red hot platforms. The Zappyrang is seemingly useless here, but it does create a shocking effect when thrown at an enemy. Building upon the boomerang monopoly the Ty family seem to operate under is Sly, Ty's brother, who sells upgraded versions of the rangs in a shop that I can only assume is his house as well. It's so far out the way that he mustn't get much business. Why is he charging his brother these prices anyway? Sly's shop isn't available until about 70% through the game, and it makes it that much more rewarding when you finally get to upgrade your ranks for a very extortionate price. You'll probably find yourself finishing the game before acquiring all the rangs, but mopping up for 100% completion and going out your way to collect more opals should be enough to be able to purchase everything. There's many a time while playing Tide 2 that areas will be blocked off, whether that's the previously mentioned cobwebs or areas that can only be accessed via the newly introduced Warparang. Now that you can buy boomerangs in any order, it can be hard to gauge what ones are important for collecting everything in the game, and which ones will simply sit as purchased and never be used. This means Bush Rescue features a lot of retreading old areas to see what you can do with your new rangs, which is something I don't particularly mind. It's rewarding to visit an area for a second time and being able to fully explore everything. It's like peeling back another layer of an already great set of stages. I understand one might be mad if the boomerang they've just slaved away at collecting opals for turns out to be a dud, but getting the funds never feels like a chore, and I'd much rather boomerang hunting was handled like this, rather than having to collect golden cogs like in the previous game and praying that Julius gives me something good. Going while accessing the stages is the newly introduced 4B Jeep. This is where the open world elements of Tide creep into play. The simple structure of this game goes like this. The game will give you a bunch of missions for you to do, then a boss mission advancing the plot, and then going back into the 4B Jeep and seeing what new areas of the map have opened up and what new missions there are. Rinse and repeat. You can tackle the missions in any order, which is such a clever way of diversifying playthroughs and making time more replayable. It's a nice change of pace, and the map isn't too complex or too huge either. It should only take you about 3 minutes to get from one side of the map to the other, and that's if the pesky frills leave you alone. I like how Shazza drives Ty around. It really makes me feel that Bush Rescue is something we're a part of as a team, rather than it being the Ty show with him doing everything himself. The car control's fine too. It's not Grand Theft Auto or anything, but for a cutesy collectible mascot platformer, it does the job well. There's a good balance between driving and the actual stages, so you should never get too sick of one or the other. There are some annoying fetch quest missions though. While generally I don't really care for fetch quest missions too much, but Ty throws 4 or 5 at you and they're all simply pick up a thing and give it to someone else. Nothing too offensive, more just like padding to make the game longer. Now that we're in the mighty Bush Rescue, we can get access to the Bunyip vehicles, which are the mechs that I was referring to before. These are purchasable through Trader Bob's, and I can only assume that Julius cooked them up, but there's nothing official on that. These vary greatly, with some purely existing for strength and tough battles, while others are intended to help out with bushfires and traverse lava. I like these Bunyip sections of the game. While playing, I kept getting flashbacks to Crash Bandicoot The Wrath of Cortex, and thinking about how awful the vehicle levels are treated in that game. It made me appreciate the inclusion of them within Ty 2 more. Instead of being sloppily thrown in like the Wrath of Cortex, you can tell that a lot of thought has gone into these things. Each vehicle comes with its own level of enjoyment though. I'd much rather jump in lava and go through fun platforming challenges than have to put up with a slow walking suit that can only pick things up. Still, the majority of them are great to use, and I particularly like how much usage the Thermo Extreme Bunyip gets. This bad boy can not only go in lava, but it also has a super coolant cannon to stop wildfires or to defeat annoying thrills. Oh, also, it can float for a bit after holding the jump button. It's just that cool. These aren't the only vehicles in the game however, as there's multiple missions that see you piloting a helicopter or controlling a submarine. The general goal of these missions is to either pick up something and put it somewhere else, or a more linear approach of just getting to the end. They're relatively quick missions, but it's amusing to see how diverse they can be, like picking up crocodiles for Ranger Ken to tag them, helping Dennis the Frog fix his motorways, or simply helping the platypus Rex out who is stranded underwater. I like these missions. They introduce more of the extended cast of the characters in the game, making it feel like you're helping out a large group of people as well as showing off their individual personalities. With them being over relatively quick, they don't stay around too long so that they become boring, and there's not that many of them that they distract from the other stuff you'll be doing either. I think they fit in great. Finally, I just appreciate how personal they are to Australia. It truly sets Ty apart from other mascot platformers. If you've watched my first video on Ty, then you might remember that I wasn't really a fan of the big open stage water and snow levels, but mainly the water levels due to how boring swimming could become. Luckily, the swimming has been severely reduced within the sequel, with the only real area with loads of water for you to dive into being the beach. I do think that cutting back on swimming has helped push the developers to come up with new challenging platforming ideas, as well as a focus on linearity and obstacles. This focus has carved out the levels being a fairly constrained area to explore when in relation to the first game, but I prefer it. The stages are no longer clogged up with an abundance of swimming or scrounging around looking for every opal. Instead, they're much smaller, with a bigger emphasis on platforming and defeating enemies. A lot of these stages have the structure of simply finding a mission, completing it and leaving, but this has resulted in a lot of the collectibles being really tricky to obtain. I like how collecting these things has become optional because it's allowed a shift in focus on tougher platforming challenges that make the reward more worthwhile. From hidden platforms to rail grinding, to using Ty's signature bite attack again as a sort of homing attack, the variety in things you'll have to do is enough to never get bored. It also helps that everything feels faster paced when compared to the first game, with the obstacles and enemies placements going up twofold. I was never really stood in a massive open stage not knowing where to go like in Snow Worries. Instead, I was throwing my ranks around like a madman, defeating everything in my path. It creates a nice mix of platforming and fighting so that one never becomes too excessive than the other. They exist as a sort of harmony. There will always be them moments in a stage where you can go gung-ho, but then there'll always be them parts with more engaging platforming. The enemies have seen an upgrade too. As part of the plot, Boss Cass creates Uber Reptiles by harnessing the power of the people of Burramudgee. These Uber Reptiles take multiple hits to defeat, are giants and terrifying, but further add a third layer of depth to a simple battle system. These things can only be defeated with the power of a bunyip, or by using an upgraded boomerang purchased from Sly, so you could run into trouble with these guys if you're not careful. They're mainly present during the opening and ending segment of the game, but they are splattered throughout the main game as you progress. The main enemies of Thrills are still as annoying as they were in the first game, but a particular stage called the Never Never features dinosaurs in all their glory as enemies. I wasn't expecting that. I quite like the locale of the levels here. They feel more diverse than the first game's simple settings of rainforest, beach and snow. The environments are all fresh, nothing is repeated twice. Being set in various locations is a really nice way of incorporating different environmental platform challenges, as one stage can be set in a volcano while another can be set in a crocodile swamp. It feels like the focus here was on stage quality rather than stage quantity, but I think it's paid off and offers a much more enjoyable experience than the first game. There's a lot to do in Tai 2 besides traditional platforming stages, so when they come it feels that much sweeter playing them. Saying that, while I do think there is a good balance of stages and vehicle missions, it would be nice to remove some of the filler duplicate vehicle missions and put that energy into developing a new area, but oh well, what's here is good. Additionally, Tai 2 has its own kart racing minigame. This can be a neat little distraction from the main game, but it's not something where you'll be spending a lot of time on. They're entirely optional anyway, you can play through the whole game without having to touch them. Although if you want that sweet 100%, you'll have to finish first in 7 races. It sounds like a lot, but you could easily do them all within half an hour. I like how there's rails to grind on here, and the drifting feels sharp to use. The items aren't anything special, just your standard missiles and boosts, but when you get hit by one it takes so long for your kart to stop jumping around that it becomes annoying. There's loads of shortcuts here too. It shouldn't be too hard to get first place, and to make things easier, the AI rubber bands like crazy if it even gets a sniff that you're gonna lose. There's a decent amount of races to do here, and I never felt like I was wasting my time by completing them all. You're rewarded with opals for finishing first, so that may be some incentive to do them all, but I'd much rather just run around the world and defeat enemies. You can also play this mode 2-player as soon as you boot the game up. I have no experience with the multiplayer, but it's neat that you can play as the other characters. The boss fights have seen a major improvement over the original game, with this set of fights being more challenging and overall more engaging. Compare the first fight with Patchy to the first boss in the original game, it's night and day. The enemies are a lot more complicated than previously, with Patchy changing his attacks depending on how much damage is being dealt to him, and the fight with Fluffy involving shooting mech titans from a distance before being able to strike Fluffy down for good. There's a nanomachine boss too, and it's nicknamed Buster. It felt like it went on forever though, waiting around for it to expose its weak point. The first 2 bosses are reused again for the final segment of the game, and it just makes me wonder what is going on with Fluffy. She appears in both games for a measly few lines before running off. Considering she's one of Boss Cass's henchmen, she hardly makes an appearance. The final segment of the game is similar to the opening sequence, a big linear segment of defeating enemies and making your way towards Boss Cass. I like how the game comes full circle like this, but this time, Tai has the powerful Shadow Bunyip, allowing him to shoot lasers at things and progress smoothly. The final boss is a 3-part fight with Boss Cass, as he throws everything together to try and take Tai down for good. I think I had a brain fart when replaying this game because I was actually struggling with this fight when I remember it being pretty easy. Still, the last bit of the fight involving Boss Cass just running around in a panic is oddly amusing. He's so defenseless. It's the equivalent of a fish flopping around on the sand. Cass is helpless here and can't do anything but accept his beating from Tai. I didn't mention the secret ending for the first Tasmanian Tiger game, and that's because the developers went in a completely different direction and made the ending obsolete. They teased a metal Tai, alluding to him being a force to be reckoned with. However, it's simply just a standard enemy within some battle arena stages, and a prototype of him can be found wandering around Burramudgee town. However, the 100% ending for Tai 2 links directly with the next game, Tai 3 Night of the Quinkin. The spiritual Bunyip Elder returns, warning Tai and Shazza about a new foe from another dimension. These shadowy creatures serve as the enemy for the following game, so it's nice that the 100% ending actually means something this time. In terms of getting 100%, I highly recommend it to get most out of the game. I've actually done it twice, once during a standard playthrough of the game and another on the sudden death mode that becomes available after finishing the game. I'm not sure if this was in the original release or if it's a new addition to the remaster, but sudden death only gives Tai 1 life, and once you're dead for good. It's not as hard as you think it is though, as you can pay to have your health expanded to double its capacity from Trader Bob's. Still, it's a nice challenge, but be careful of a certain troublesome beetle mission, as one touch from the beetle kills Tai instantly and will leave you feeling depressed if it kills your run. I've played through this game 3 separate times and each playthrough never felt overly drawn out or that I was wasting my time. I genuinely enjoy all my time spent playing this game, and to be honest, I could easily hop on it right now and play through it for a 4th time. That just involves deleting one of my saves though, which I'm not sure that I want to do just yet. They have too much sentimental value. The soundtrack didn't stand out to me though as much as the first game, which is a little upsetting. Maybe it's because I played this game directly after the first, but I can't really recall a track off the top of my head besides the one for the lovable Burramudgee town. The Australian twangy sounds of the didgeridoo and jaw hops are still here, carrying on the spirit of the first game. I think maybe because Tai 2 has so much going on, so many gameplay styles and missions, that it distracts a little bit away from the music, whereas in the first game when it was a lot slower, I could take everything in around me and pay full attention to the soundtrack. I still like it, but it doesn't have the same effect that the first game had on me. I can't recall a track as adrenaline pumping as the racing tracks in the previous game, as there's a huge emphasis on chill guitar strings to build atmosphere here. The song for driving around draws attention for this. Instead of hyping us up to explore southern rivers, the game opts for a more chill track to drive around to. Saying that though, Tai 2 is a huge improvement over the first game and is genuinely one of my favourite platformers of all time. While Bush Rescue may have an overabundance of vehicle missions and it may be lacking in some areas, it more than makes up for it just by being a blast to play. Nothing in this game made me frustrated, angry or bored, or to think that any part of it was stupid. You can tell that a lot of heart went into this. It feels like every time you enter Burramudgee, you can feel an overwhelming sense of passion emanating. It perfectly evolves from the first game into something that has its own identity, not strapped down to being compared to collectathons from before it. The next entry in the series, Tai 3 Night of the Quinken, was never released in the PAL region for whatever reason. Maybe the Tai games didn't sell that well over here. While the third game hasn't had a remaster yet, it's still available for purchase on Steam, which is how I'll be playing it for the next review. Thanks so much for watching guys, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe, and stay tuned for Tai 3 Night of the Quinken, the black sheep of the Tai franchise.